hold me, love me, hold me, love me. Ain't got nothing but love, babe. 8 days a week. We're going to see that Beetle, right?
No.
Oh.
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, Blue Beetle is not a George Harrison biopic.
Aw. They're disappointed now.
That actually would be a kick-ass title for a George Harrison biopic now that I think about it.
Oh well. Ladies and gentlemen and non-binary folks, welcome back to StilerBros at the Movies, and today we are going to be seeing a movie that I have been waiting, personally, 15 years for, Blue Beetle.
So, a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, I guess?
Give or take.
We had got news that that one movie in development DC was bringing into development was for the then kind of still on the newer side HBO streaming, Warner Brothers streaming service HBO Max was going to be an adaptation of Blue Beetle.
And boy, was that something exciting, because I have wanted to see Blue Beetle since in an actual live-action movie, especially this iteration of Blue Beetle, since we first saw him in the pilot episode of Batman the Brave and the Bold.
And that's a funny thing about the character of Blue Beetle, because there's a lot of history to that. If you want to know more about that, you can check out Link Carr's retrospective on it.
Card right now.
Yep. But one fascinating thing about Blue Beetle is that it's kind of one of the earliest instances of a legacy character.
Because Blue Beetle started out as basically a Green Hornet clone that evolved into a Batman clone.
That evolved into basically Spider-Man was Iron Man, but that was also Green Lantern.
But anyway, Jaime Reyes, probably the most popular iteration of the Blue Beetle, at least of the modern era of comics, was obviously the biggest choice for who are we going to get to be the Blue Beetle when we eventually when we actually turn him into a superhero movie in this modern age of superheroes. Particularly because who knows about who Dan Garrett is, and who knows anything about Ted Kord other than Maxwell Lord shot him, and he was the guy before Jaime Reyes.
Yes, but this was obviously something that was also a big deal because it is the first Latin American superhero that is headlining a superhero movie, and also just in terms of comic book history, he's probably one of the youngest characters to ever be made into the title character of a movie, given the fact that the character is only 17 years old.
Now, jump forward a few months after Blue Beetle was announced as a Max project. They pretty much announced, hey, we've been looking at what we've got so far on this, and it's looking pretty decent. So how about we upgrade this to a theatrical release?
And so they did, and we have and now James Gunn is with James Gunn and Peter Safran in charge of DC. This is kind of sort of the beginning of their DCU.
Though, of course, Peter Safran was already attached before he was made co-CEO of DC Films.
As far as we can tell, there were probably some early talks happening when he was with him and James Gunn at DC when he was brought onto the project.
Now, is it sad that this movie gets pushed forward and Batgirl will remain in a vault until the day that that someone finally decides to leak it? Yeah, but for right now, Blue Beetle is once again a movie that I have been looking forward to for a long time. I can imagine there are a lot of comic book fans that have been really looking forward to seeing Jaime Reyes properly brought to the live-action screen.
Because again, the character has existed since 2006, so he's had his fan base build up.
Basically, if you're a millennial comic book fan, you probably know at least a little bit about Jaime Reyes as the Blue Beetle.
Yeah.
And all these years later, we've got him. And so obviously, who's the cast and crew? Bunch of people that we particularly don't know.
Yeah.
That's the thing about superhero movies nowadays. They've been pulling in a lot of talent from more independent sources and people that or just people from like music videos or who have done like 1 or 2 movies before, and that's where they're getting their directors. Where they're getting their actors is typically, hey, the slightly popular person from slightly popular TV show, get in here. You're gonna be headlining a movie now.
Yes. So, and all of that is building up to say that the director of this piece is Angel Manuel Soto, who is a Puerto Rican-born director who has done some fairly successful indie fare, but has not really had his big breakout movie just yet.
And the star is... crap. I can't remember his name for the life of me. I'm sorry. I know that he was in Cobra Kai. We've never watched Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
Not even when it was on YouTube. Not now that it's on Netflix. I hear it's good.
We hear good things about Cobra Kai. We weren't Karate Kid. We weren't raised on Karate Kid, so that's kind of a fault line spot for us.
But I'm sure he's fine. I'm sure he's fine. He looks great in the role. He looks happy to be in the role.
Yeah. Yeah, and with his casting, there is also a little bit of interesting stuff because they kind of seem to be diverting from the comics a little bit with certain things. Like, for instance, Jaime is no longer a teenager. He is a college. He's a freshly college graduated character, a fresh college graduate. His friend group seems to be missing. Seems to be completely changed out for the movie.
And there seems to be a much bigger emphasis, at least from the perspective, from what limited perspective we have on the comics, on Jaime's family.
Yes.
Including his uncle, played by George Lopez.
Who is probably the biggest name in the, at least
of the main good guy characters.
Yeah, of the main good guy characters, he's probably the biggest name in this movie.
Because we don't know a lot about the actors.
They brought there's a lot of newer talent.
Or at least talent that we've never heard from
Yes.
before.
There's a lot of more obscure talent in our radar because we are basic and we only really watch a lot of mainstream, and most of the stuff we watch is mainstream stuff.
And of course, George Lopez is not a stranger to superhero movies, as he starred in one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. Praise be. Anyway, along for the ride, we've also got a villain played by Susan Sarandon, who is apparently playing Ted Kord's sister from the comics.
A character that I don't think was introduced, that as far as we're aware, wasn't introduced until last year with the most recent Blue Beetle arc, and will probably play a role in the upcoming arc that is coming to the comics next month.
Either way, it's just Susan Sarandon playing the villain of this movie. At least that's what we've heard. But come on, she's playing the villain. We're literally seeing her in the trailer, telling the bad guy villain to go and to take the scarab from Jaime. Speaking of the scarab, this is a very Power Rangers-esque Kamen Rider inspired the Guyver inspired action movie. And so who better to play Kajida, the scarab of Blue Beetle, than Ms. Becky G from Power Rangers 2017.
First gay superhero in cinema history, and now she's a voice in a DC movie.
Whatever.
It is what it is.
The thing about this movie, at least from the trailers, is that it does not look like a very expensive movie. Like, I'm sure it cost a lot of money to make because it's a very CGI-heavy action movie, where at some points they ended up putting their main actor in a very bulky practical suit. But from the looks of it, it does not look to be an expensive movie. This doesn't seem like we threw a lot of money at it. It seems like we threw a good chunk of money at it. Like, it's not Max Steel cheap, but it's also not Iron Man expensive.
Yeah, and at the same time, just seeing the trailers last time we went to the movie theater, it kind of felt like this was an early 2000s movie. It felt like an early 2000s superhero movie in the best way possible. Like one of those, not necessarily a memorable early 2000s superhero movie.
Yeah, it it kind of once again feels like one of those secret movies, you know, the one like the G.I. Joe movies were when we last talked about them. Just kind of one of those movies where it almost feels like the studio didn't spend a lot of money on the movie, but then kind of didn't want you to see it, so that they could, didn't want you to see it, but they also had a contract set up so that they had to release it theatrically.
Yeah, it's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing where we talk to our friend who is a big DC fan, and we talk to him all the time about DC and their releases. We've had a lot of great conversations with him about the whole James Gunn situation, but mainly we texted him the other day about this, and he completely had forgotten that this movie was coming out.
Which is just basically a whole thing of, this movie has been so poorly marketed over the last few months that they released one teaser trailer that they released one teaser trailer earlier this year, and then it took them until like maybe 2 months ago to start releasing real trailers.
I mean, part of that is also the fact that the writers have been on strike for over a month now, and it doesn't look like they're going to be, and they weren't able to promote the movie.
But this movie has been so poorly marketed, more or less, that a small but somewhat vocal grouping of the fan base, hopefully the Venn diagram between them and Snyder Stands is a bit more like this and a little less like this, but a small but vocal minority of fans have attempted to create some kind of guerrilla marketing on social media with the hashtag bluebeetle battalion, probably because they think in vain that this is somehow going to allow them to hold on just a little bit longer to the Snyderverse.
I mean, we also, speaking of small but dedicated fan-hated groups, we also have a lot of Latino rights groups stepping up and championing this movie, getting a good box office, and it is apparently projecting to do better than it had originally expected.
Apparently the news has been good for what they're doing with this. For right now, we don't know. It's been getting fantastic reviews, which makes me a little more optimistic about this than I was going in, because obviously this is not as I keep mentioning, this is an anticipated movie for me, but it's not my most anticipated of the summer. That already came and went. I saw it, I cried, I saw it again, I cried again. I don't think I'll ever be able to get through it without crying again. But for right now, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about Blue Beetle, and we will talk more about it when we've actually seen it after the jump. That was shockingly emotional.
Yeah, I think part of it is just the fact that the big overarching goal of the DC universe in film at this point, and I feel like I'm not in any way jumping the gun by saying it feels...
Jumping the gun?
Yeah. It feels like we're going to be doing what pretty much every DC movie is going to be pretty much what at its core, every James Gunn movie is about, and that's family.
Granted, I don't think every James Gunn movie ever made has been like that, but
it's at its core, they've been about one way or another, not like overtly, but at its core, at one point or another, family is a theme that comes up in all of James Gunn's movies.
And I think that this one really accentuated that, because yeah, it's very clear that Latin American culture very much is built on the idea of close familial bonds. It's a thing that, like, Coco and Encanto and so many other things that we have seen in the last few years that were built on the backs of Latin American culture just kind of is ingrained in it. So so it was not unnatural to be like, hey, let's make a big focus of this story be Jaime's family.
And in that spirit, this is more an ensemble piece than it is a story specifically about Jaime.
And in a lot of ways that works, because the ensemble just works together so well. I mean, but you gotta give props especially to Zola Madueñas.
It's Madueña.
Who has to carry this whole thing on his back as basically the first major Latin American superhero to headline one of these movies of the current era.
Yes, he's also mostly because they're basically kickstarting the DCU from scratch, kinda.
They name drop Superman and the Flash and Batman but we're never ever privy to who these people are in comparison. For all we know, George Clooney is Batman and Superman is Christopher Reeve. He's still alive.
Yeah, there's all this stuff, but there's a bunch of Easter eggs, but really this is a self-contained movie. And one thing is, this really made me feel weirdly enough made me feel nostalgic for the first Iron Man movie.
And I don't think that was an accident, really, because there are a lot of fight scene beats and just general plot beats that are kind of ripped straight from Iron Man, so I don't think it was an accident that they were like Iron Man, think Iron Man.
I mean, for a lot of reasons, especially because it helps you get back to when superhero movies were small, contained ideas. Not knocking the MCU, I am still a massive Marvel slut who will watch and enjoy everything they've put out so far.
But it's just the fact that this is a small story, and it's probably the best way to kick off a new iteration of the DCU.
The world is not at stake, really, at this point in the story.
I mean, it is, but for right now, the stakes aren't just stop this one guy or the entire world falls. It's stop this one guy or eventually the dominoes will start to fall over until eventually the world falls.
Yeah, it is not a save the world movie. It is a stop this one thing from happening, or eventually the world will end.
And I think that one of the smarter things this movie does is because it's a smaller movie, because it's a self-contained movie, it chooses to kind of subtextually be about something. The villain in this movie is both literally and metaphorically gentrification.
Yes.
I don't think it was a mistake that they made Susan Sarandon the villain, an older white lady who, let's be honest, her politics are a little hard to process, and in real life, and her life, but in the movie, she's this older white lady who seems nice on the surface, but when she is actually up close and personal to you, just kind of has this vibe about her. And then her main henchman is a Latin American man.
Yeah, there's some text there that might also just kind of be text.
And the fact that the entire movie does not spell out that, oh, she built this guy up. When she's like, when I found you, you were nothing and everything like that. And it doesn't spell it out for you, but it's there. I think it's definitely there.
Yeah. And Angel Manuel Soto did an amazing job with the action scenes. There was a lot of wide shots, a lot of camera movement where you could see a lot of the action. There was not a lot of shaky cam, so we could see everything that was going on in a very clear visual language.
And when there was shaky cam, it was less in action scenes and more in scenes where we really need to feel up close and personal to the characters in certain beats. And I think he really nailed it home, especially when it comes down to scenes where you really need to feel what the characters on screen are feeling, and he just nails it.
And the character moments are solid on almost every level. George Lopez steals...
I love Uncle Rudy. George
Lopez basically steals almost every scene he's in, just from being the one guy in the scene who just has that one-liner that makes you laugh.
Uncle Rudy is just everybody's crazy conspiracy theorist uncle, only, less dangerous.
Yeah, he's less the guy on Facebook.
It's fun. It's more fun to watch him because he's not angrily hurting someone. Because he's not angry and hurting people. He's just the crazy conspiracy. He's like a crazy conspiracy theorist uncle pre-2010.
Yeah, he's not the kind of uncle who you'll see on Facebook and you're like, Jesus Christ, we should check where this guy was on January 6th. He's more just the conspiracy theory where he just doesn't trust
Like the
anybody.
he doesn't trust the government, but he also does not actively fight the government. He's just one of those guys who's like trying to find. He's just like, here, let me pry the cavity.
Let me pry your
fillings out of your teeth, because that's how the CIA tracks you.
Yeah.
And George Lopez is just perfectly cast in that role. He's not doing the whole shtick that he used to do on the sitcom, but he knows how to deliver the one-liners, and when he needs to be funny, he's funny. And the whole cast is just perfectly on balance.
Yeah. It's a camaraderie and a chemistry that you need when you're casting a big loving family dynamic.
And I think that's really what nails it home. The fact that this is a movie about a family. It's not DC's first movie with a family as the central point, where they're basically an ensemble movie where the lead character needs to call that in. And of course, there's also deeper mysteries and Easter eggs up the wazoo for Blue Beetle's prior history in the comics and comics.
Yeah.
And also, this movie does not skimp on things like the soundtrack is this very powerful synth music that goes with the neon aesthetic that they matched up to Blue Beetle's armor lighting up at certain points.
Along with a lot of Latin American pop songs.
Like when Selena comes on, it's like that feels right at home.
Yeah.
But then, of course, when Ted Kord's music starts to come on, not really a spoiler, they go into Ted Kord's workshop and they get stuff. This is in the trailers. It's of course American hard and soft rock music.
Yeah.
So and of course they got some Cypress Hill, just because of course Jaime would be an old school hip hop fan, and of course they'd pick the hip hop group that incorporated Spanish into their raps.
Yeah.
And also there are two post-credit scenes. One that builds that very in the vein of usual Marvel's and comic book movies in general, builds the lore of what's going to happen if they are lucky enough to get a sequel.
I hope there's a sequel.
And then there's the one at the very end that's basically, hey, let's expand on the joke from earlier.
Yeah.
This is very much a movie that builds off the templates that movies prior to it have. And you know what? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
So what if this movie takes a lot of beats from Ant-Man and Iron Man and even a little bit of Spider-Man, but when you take all these elements and it works, why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah. It's pretty much just a simple comic book movie, but it feels like it kind of feels like a return to form for some things, where it's just not a complicated save the world, change the multiverse kind of movie. It's just a very small family drama. It's not the heights of Guardians Volume 3 or Beyond or Across the Spider-Verse, but it's a simple movie that we kind of need if we're going to kick this new era of DC off correctly. Yep.
And so, that's it. I don't have anything else to say to you.
No, I don't got anything.
Alright, so, be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment what you thought of Blue Beetle if you happen to be able to see it, and don't forget to tune in next time when you throw up on my lawn. Bye.
Bye.